Hey, what is up, everybody? Welcome to the Retro Wrestling Review Series, Season 8, Episode 11. And now I'm going to be giving you guys my NXT TakeOver The End review. This show now was the first time that NXT had gone back to Full Sail University since NXT TakeOver Respect. I was kind of wondering why at first they were doing that, but thinking about it, actually kind of was going to be nice to see NXT have a special back in Full Sail University, just because that's where they made their name, so it made sense for them to have one back there to give it to the fans that always go to the NXT television tapings. So I was all down for them having the special back in Full Sail University. It's a place that was very well known, and it gives back, like I said, to the fans that always support NXT and goes to the television tapings where they are in Full Sail University. So that is nice that they ended up going back. And NXT had obviously been growing into this big brand. They had a couple of specials outside of Full Sail University, so it was made sense for them to come back. So now that I've kind of talked about the build-up in that regard, let's talk about the actual code itself. We have a total of 5 matches on this show, and I'm going to just not really say what the matches are, but kind of go over what the stipulations were. We have 2 singles matches on this show. We have an NXT Tag Team Championship match, an NXT Women's Championship match, and then the main event, it's going to be an NXT Championship match. And that's all I'm going to say for the show. I'll say what the actual code is when I get further along into this video. I'm now going to start covering the show. I'm going to cover it the same way. I'm going to cover the preview show first, then the pre-show, then I'm going to cover the actual show itself in different takes. So I hope you guys enjoy this video, and let's start covering NXT TakeOver The End. Okay, so I just watched the preview show, and we had the hostess, Kathy Kelly, and Kathy Kelly was somebody that had been signed by WWE in the spring of 2016 in April. And I'm not exactly sure what she does with WWE. I know she has like a show where she promotes social media. She occasionally does like the interviews for NXT, but I'm not exactly sure what the exact thing that she does for WWE is. I kind of wish they would utilize her a little bit more, because she's actually pretty decent at her job. But I guess they don't, so I guess it is what it is. But now going over the actual matches themselves on the show, we have a singles match between Andrade Cien Almas and Ty Dillinger. We have an NXT Tag Team Championship match between The Revival and American Alpha. We have another singles match between Shinsuke Nakamura and Austin Aries. We have an NXT Women's Championship match between Asuka and Nia Jax. And then we have the main event. It's going to be a steel cage match for the NXT Championship between Samoa Joe and Finn Balor. The third straight NXT special that Finn Balor and Samoa Joe will be facing each other in the main event, which was, just kind of showed how intensified that feud was. And I'll talk about that more as I talk about the build-up, but those what the matches are. And now let's get to the build-up of this show. So starting with the build-up for the NXT Women's Championship match. The reason why this match was happening was because Asuka had won the NXT Women's Championship from Bayley at NXT TakeOver Dallas. And Asuka was somebody that was just running right through the NXT Women's Division. She hadn't lost a match. She was just running right through them. She had won the NXT Women's Championship 6 months into her debut. And Bayley really wanted to have a rematch clause for the title. And originally Bayley was supposed to have a rematch clause here. However, as this during the road to NXT TakeOver The End, Bayley was facing Nia Jax in a match, and Bayley ended up injuring her knee in that match, and Nia Jax was able to pull out a victory against her. So NXT General Manager at the time, William Regal, who's still the NXT General Manager today, found out from the personal trainers that Bayley was not medically cleared to compete, so they had to find a new #1 contender. So Nia Jax ended up winning a triple threat match to become the #1 contender to the NXT Women's Championship. And you also had Nia Jax, who was the monster of NXT. She was also running roughshod through the NXT Women's division. And they clearly wanted to have a match between Asuka and Nia Jax at some point, so it made sense to do it here. I think they wanted to save Bayley getting a rematch for the title at a bigger show, which does eventually happen, which I will talk about in the next episode of this show. And afterwards, but in theory, this match made sense to happen. You had Asuka, who was dominant, and you had Nia Jax, who was dominant, and Asuka and Nia Jax would have face-offs going into the show, and then during the contract signing for the championship match, Nia Jax was like, am I really supposed to be afraid of you? Like, people are afraid of you, and I know you beat Bayley at NXT TakeOver Dallas to become the champion, but I broke Bayley's spirit, and I took her out so she couldn't compete in the title match. And then Asuka would say, you say you're not afraid of me? Well, you should be, and that kind of helped really intensify this feud. And then Nia Jax ended up laying out Asuka in the contract signing, and that led us to this match here. A big matchup to look forward to. So that was pretty good there. Then we had the build up to the NXT Championship match between Finn Balor and Samoa Joe. The reason why this match was happening was because before Samoa Joe and Finn Balor even came to WWE, they were friends for 10 years all over the world. Finn Balor was somebody that had wrestled all over the world, in Japan, in the UK, but then eventually in December of 2014, he ended up making his debut in NXT, and he started to really start to make a name for himself in NXT, and along came the way Samoa Joe, who also made a name for himself. He was very well known. He made a name for himself in Ring of Honor and in TNA Impact Wrestling. And Samoa Joe, though, then ended up debuting in NXT at NXT TakeOver Unstoppable. And he started to run roughshod as well. So Finn Balor ended up winning the NXT Championship on July 4th in Japan, where he made a name for himself. And he became the face of NXT, and then eventually Samoa Joe and Finn Balor formed a little bit of a tag team, and they ended up winning the Dusty Rhodes Tag Team Classics tournament. And Samoa Joe, though, had wanted a chance to face Finn Balor for the NXT Championship. He wanted an NXT title match against him, but William Regal felt like that was something that he had to earn, so Samoa Joe failed to become #1 contender. So after an NXT Championship title defense by Finn Balor, Samoa Joe ended up attacking Finn Balor, turning heel in the process. And he said he did it because he felt like that Finn Balor had asked him to be his tag team partner, but he refused to give him something in return. He wanted an NXT Championship match, something that he felt like he was owed the second he stepped into NXT. And Finn Balor had talked about how Samoa Joe threw away a 10-year friendship just to get the title. So this led to the match between them at NXT TakeOver London, where Finn Balor was able to knock off Samoa Joe. Then it would lead to Samoa Joe eventually scratching his claw on his way back to become the #1 contender again for the NXT Championship, where he would where we would get the rematch between Finn Balor and Samoa Joe at NXT TakeOver Dallas, where Finn Balor was once again able to knock off Samoa Joe. And around this point, Finn Balor had finally become the longest reigning NXT champion in NXT history, which is a record that still holds today. But then a couple of weeks later, at a live event in Lowell, Massachusetts, Samoa Joe ended up winning the NXT Championship from Finn Balor, which I'm kind of pissed that happened because I had a chance to actually go to that show. But a couple of reasons why I didn't. One, I didn't think I was going to be able to afford it and stuff because it was right after WrestleMania 32 and I had to put all my money into spending and stuff for WrestleMania 32. And two, I didn't think anything big was going to happen since it was just a house show, so I didn't think it was going to be that big of a deal. It was something I wanted to go to, but it was something that I just couldn't make happen. So I'm like, you know what, it's probably not that big a deal, I'll just go to the next house show. Well, little did I know that Samoa Joe was going to win the NXT Championship and end Finn Balor's longest NXT Championship reign. it definitely, I guess, makes you want to actually go to these shows, though, because a title change can still happen at a house show. So that's definitely going to teach me a lesson. But, you know, Samoa Joe had talked about how he finally did what he promised he was going to do, and that's become the NXT champion. And Finn Balor wanted his rematch for the NXT championship, so William Regal granted him his rematch for NXT TakeOver The End. But because these guys were brawling all over the arena, and they couldn't, and security could break them up, and they couldn't keep these guys contained. A way that William Regal was going to keep these guys contained was they were going to have them face each other in a steel cage match, which was going to be the first ever steel cage match in NXT history. There had never been a cage match, and now there was going to be. And it made sense because the feud called for a stipulation match, and a steel cage match was perfect for them. And, you know, Samoa Joe, I talked about how Finn Balor was not going to survive the steel cage, how he was going to absolutely destroy him. Finn Balor said that you know what you're going to expect from Samoa Joe, but you don't know what you're going to expect from Finn Balor. Then at the end, they finally had a big interview segment that Corey Graves hosted for them, where we were going to find out where everything finally started to pull out. You know, so they went back and forth about why Samoa Joe didn't get his title match. Finn Balor talked about how it ended up being a nightmare when he lost the NXT Championship, because it definitely wasn't a Cinderella moment. And he didn't regret putting the title on the line, because that's what he did. He fought for the title, and that's kind of where that argument came, how Samoa Joe claimed that Finn Balor was always ducking him. He knew that Samoa Joe was going to couldn't beat Finn Balor. Well, no, that Finn Balor couldn't beat Samoa Joe. Finn Balor talked about how he survived Samoa Joe over 4 and 1, and he talked about how Corey Graves asked him if he's going to be able to win this match since he's never been in a cage match, but he said, well, he had never been in a ladder match before either, but he ended up winning. He talked about how he wasn't thinking about what he's going to do for the future. The only thing that he cared about was winning the NXT Championship, the now and the present. And they ended up having a big face-to-face confrontation with each other. And this was going to be the finally big blow-off match. And Samoa Joe said that he was going to end Finn Balor, which probably meant that he was going to end his career. And this match just worked so perfectly on so many different levels. It was finally the big blow-off match. This was a feud that had gone on since October of 2015 and was going to finally blow off in NXT TakeOver The End on June 4th, 2016. So it was awesome. It was the best feud that probably NXT had in 2016. But yeah, then continuing, we have the build-up for the NXT Tag Team Championship match between the Revival and American Alpha. The reason why this match was happening was because American Alpha were a tag team. They became a team in 2015. And they finally ended up defeating the Revival to win the NXT Tag Team Championships from them at NXT TakeOver Dallas. And the Revival were obsessed with getting back those championships. They would take out everybody, and they said that they felt like the top guys, but they needed the NXT Tag Team titles to really validate that they were top guys. They already knew that they were great, but the NXT Tag Team titles would really prove that they were great. And they were even talking about how American Alpha are just little amateur wrestlers. They were the real top guys of NXT. American Alpha talked about how they were willing to do anything, and they ended up laying them out on the go-home show of NXT, and it pretty much led to the NXT Tag Team Championship rematch. So overall, pretty good build-up feud there. Then we had the build-up for Andrade, Cien Almas, and Ty Dillinger. Andrade, Cien Almas, they were hyping up as a new superstar coming to NXT. He was originally a masked luchador, but then eventually he ended up unmasking himself. I think they wanted him to remove the mask. I'm not exactly sure why, but they did. And Ty Dillinger was somebody that was slowly getting over in NXT. He started doing his whole 10 chant that the fans really started to love. And I think they just wanted Ty Dillinger as a name for him to beat. They didn't even announce that was his opponent, but that was the reason. They just wanted to really hype up Andrade, Cien Almas. But they were also kind of building somewhat of a story with Ty Dillinger, how he was the perfect 10, but he could never get the big victory. So I liked it. Then the final build-up is the build-up for the Austin Aries Shinsuke Nakamura match. This match actually is a pretty decently built-up match. These were the two of the hottest signees that NXT had. They both debuted around the same time. Austin Aries and Shinsuke Nakamura both had their first match at NXT TakeOver Dallas. And, you know, Austin Aries had told William Regal that he didn't just want to be another guy on the roster. He wanted to make an impact in NXT. So, Austin Aries and Shinsuke Nakamura ended up tag teaming with each other, where they ended up pulling out the victory. But they weren't interested in being a tag team with each other, because then Austin Aries came out and cut a promo talking about how it's one thing to be the best, but then you have to worry about someone better than you coming along. But he wants to be great. He wants to be known as the greatest man that ever lived. And he said that he's going to be one day become NXT champion. Shinsuke Nakamura came out, and Shinsuke Nakamura said that the NXT championship isn't coming to the greatest. It's going to be coming to the King of Strong style. And they both wanted to be NXT champion. They wanted to rise up in the rankings of NXT. And Austin Aries still even felt like that he had a lot of success in NXT, but he felt like he wasn't exactly in the radar that he should have been. Shinsuke Nakamura was a hot signee as well. So you could kind of see that there was some tension between Shinsuke Nakamura and Austin Aries, because maybe Austin Aries felt like Shinsuke Nakamura was taking a spotlight. So William Regal came out and he made the match between Austin Aries and Shinsuke Nakamura for NXT TakeOver The End. A match that made sense because of the fact that these were the two hottest signees. This was kind of a way to kind of dictate which one was going to get the bigger push. Was it going to be Austin Aries? Was it going to be Shinsuke Nakamura? So this match made a lot of sense, and it was kind of just that one mid-card match where you don't just fight for championships, you fight for pride, and you fight to be the best, and that's exactly what this match was for. So this match obviously had the build-up in that regard, and that was pretty much the entire build-up. Overall, the preview show was actually fairly enjoyable, and now that I've covered that, now I'm going to go watch the pre-show, and I'm going to come on here and cover that. So overall, the preview show was pretty damn good. Okay, so now we had the pre-show. We had Renee Young, Lita, and Corey Graves on the panel. And obviously Renee Young since then has gone on to host other pre-shows on the network. Well, you know, for like the NXT specials and for the mainstream WWE pay-per-views, but now she only does the mainstream WWE pay-per-views. She's the co-host of both Talkin' Smack and Raw Talk. And she is also the backstage interviewer on SmackDown. So Renee Young's had a pretty decent spot in the company. Lita was just really there for name recognition, since she was a former women's champion and everything. But you know, she was somebody that was there. She would do the panel for the NXT specials and the mainstream WWE pay-per-views, but then her contract expired in November of 2016, so now she doesn't do them anymore. And Corey Graves would continue to commentate for NXT. He was the big heel commentator. Then eventually he was called up to the main roster in July after the brand split, and he was the heel commentator for Raw. And then once 205 Live debut, he was the heel commentator there. And then eventually he ended up leaving NXT in 2017, so now he only does commentary for Raw and 205 Live. So he's in actually a pretty decent spot. You know, pretty much the only thing they did though here was they just kind of ran down the matches and stuff. But it was nice to see NXT back at Full Sail University, at least for a special anyways. So the only thing that happens is the Revival get interviewed, and Dash is trying to act like he's crying, and Dawson says that it was a nice emotional moment for American Alpha when they beat them for the NXT Tag Team Championships. But they say that they're a good little amateur wrestling team, but I bet they've never been in a fight in their lives, and they're not going to be able to fight the Revival. And they say that they're going to prove why they're the top tag team in NXT when they become the first team ever to become two-time NXT Tag Team Champions. And then that was it. Overall, it was a good promo, but that was pretty much the whole pre-show. Overall, the pre-show I thought was pretty decent. So now that I've covered the pre-show, now I'm going to cover the actual show itself. Okay, so now we had the actual show itself, and before I actually started watching the show, I wanted to talk about the introduction that happened. it showed this introduction talking about the beginning, how NXT originally started in Full Sail University, kind of showed the old days of NXT, all the new stars that were there, and how they started their career in NXT, but they've gone on to have success on the main roster. But now tonight's the beginning, the end of the beginning, and pretty much talking about how certain superstars are going to be beginning their careers, but some of them are going to be ending, like they talk about. But they even showed like the ending of Bayley's reign as NXT champion that was ended by Asuka. Samoa Joe ending the NXT championship reign of Finn Balor. So you could definitely feel like there was some sort of end coming to NXT, like they really wanted to make you know that. But I thought this was a really good build-up video to hype you to watch the show, and I think NXT knocked this out of the poke. Okay, so continuing with the actual show, we had Corey Graves and Tom Phillips on commentary for this show, and everybody knows how I feel about Tom Phillips at this point. I mean, I think he's a douchebag, he screws people out of their jobs. He says he texts people while he's on the plane saying he's gonna face fuck them, so, I think he's a piece of crap. But apparently he seems to have a big role in this company because he's the play-by-play guy in NXT right now, the play-by-play guy for SmackDown, and the play-by-play guy for 205 Live. So the company seems to like to put him out there on commentary, even though he's terrible. But we had the first actual match on the show. It was Ty Dillinger versus Andrade Cien Almas, and Ty Dillinger really wasn't a heel in this match. He was more of a tweener because he was playing off those 10 chants that he had, because he started doing those and the fans really started to catch on to it. But he definitely wasn't face either, because he was doing a lot of heel tactics in this match. But you could definitely feel that he was a tweener. But I think they were slowly turning Ty Dillinger face. And obviously this was Andrade Cien Almas' debut in NXT. This was the first time we had seen his face, because we had only seen him in vignettes, the back of his head when he took his mask off. He came out in a fedora for some reason. I don't really know why. But I thought this was a good, solid opening matchup. Almas and Dillinger chain wrestle each other. Dillinger hits a cartwheel and does the 10 taunt right into Almas' face. And Almas hits a head scissors, driving Dillinger on the outside. He acts like he's going to hit a suicide dive on him, but then Dillinger instead just swings back and hangs out there. So Dillinger gets back in the win. He hits a Totoro backbreaker on Almas, covers him. Almas kicks out, and then Almas out wrestles Dillinger some more. He hangs upside down on the turnbuckle and kicks Dillinger right in the chest, and he goes for a moonsault, but Dillinger thinks he's moved out of the way, but Almas lands on his feet, and then he just hits the flip anyways. So I thought that was a nice touch. It was the first time I had seen something like that at the time anyways. I see him do that all the time now though. But he covers him, Dillinger kicks out, and then he hangs upside down on the turnbuckle again, and Dillinger hits a super kick right into his face, which must have hurt more since he was upside down. Dillinger covers him, Almas kicks out, then he goes for the tiebreaker. Almas counters into a drop kick into the corner, then he hits like an enziguri to the back of Dillinger's spine, and then he hits a wheelbarrow bulldog, and then he hits the running knee in the corner for the win, and Almas goes over. It did make sense because this was his debut match. He wanted to make Andrade Cien Almas look credible, but I thought they made Dillinger look pretty strong in this match. And the aftermath for both wrestlers came. They would go on to have another match on an episode of NXT where Andrade Cien Almas ended up pulling out the victory there. And then Andrade Cien Almas pretty much tried to have his face run, but he was really bland as a baby face. It just really wasn't working. He really wasn't getting over that much. So then they decided to turn him heel, and he's pretty much still bland, but he's better off being a heel because he's more aggressive and stuff. And now they're trying to tell this whole storyline with him where he doesn't take wrestling seriously and he just likes to go out and party, which is a weird storyline to tell. But as for Ty Dillinger would go on to become like the big baby face of NXT. He became really over with the crowd. Like you don't know what he was, but they started to embrace it a little bit more. He would end up debuting in the Royal Rumble match at number 10, which was, I thought, a nice touch. Well, he didn't end up winning, and then he was officially called up full time to the main roster on the SmackDown after WrestleMania 33, which I thought was cool for Ty Dillinger. And now he's going to be, well, he's back. His match has probably already happened, but he's going to be wrestling at Backlash, so that's cool for Ty Dillinger. So overall, both wrestlers benefited pretty well from this match. Alright, so then the next match was an NXT Tag Team Championship match. NXT Tag Team Champions American Alpha versus the Revival. And I actually thought this was a really good Tag Team Championship match here. I would probably say I enjoyed this match more than I did their match at NXT TakeOver Dallas. Just because this match was a little bit longer, and they did a little bit more moves in this match. The first match was kind of just an opening match, but the match starts with Dawson and Chad Gable, and he tries to bring Gable into his corner, and Dash tags himself in, and then Dash and Chad Gable do some chain wrestling with each other. Gable gets the upper hand, being the amateur background, and he hits a couple of head scissors takedown on Dash, and then Jason Jordan comes in, gets tagged in, and he takes out Dash and Dawson with a couple of drop kicks, and then the Revival have a face-off with American Alpha. They start trading blows with each other. American Alpha get him into a ankle lock, and they were able to get out of it, and then they hit double German suplexes on him. So then the Revival have to regroup, and Chad Gable continues to out wrestle Dash, and he pretty much out wrestles him at every turn. Dawson hits an uppercut on Chad Gable, and the Revival try to cheap shot Jason Jordan. They go to hit a cross double suplex on him, but he lands on his feet, and then Chad Gable hits a double cross body on the Revival. And then American Alpha hit double drop kicks on the Revival, and then they hit a double clotheslines outside the ring. And American Alpha end up standing tall again, and the Revival are just trying to figure out what to do. Eventually Dawson ends up taking a cheap shot at Jason Jordan, and the referee uses this as a distraction so the Revival can hang up Chad Gable on the top rope, and then the Revival really start to get the heat on Chad Gable. They really start to work over his arm, but Chad Gable tries to fight back. He nearly makes it to his corner, but Dawson cuts him off with a spine buster. He covers him. Gable kicks out. And the Revival continue to dominate Chad Gable. He gets knocked out to the outside, and he tries to get back into the ring, but Dash chop blocks him, taking him out, and they cheap shot Dawson cheap shots Jason Jordan, and Jordan tries to get in the ring. The Revival uses as a distraction, and Dash gets him up like he's going to spine bust him, and Dawson hits a leg drop on him. I thought that was a good double team move, but eventually Jason Jordan's Chad Gable is finally able to get the tag, and he ends up getting the hot tag on Jason Jordan. Jason Jordan starts taking out the Revival, and he hits a ton of drop kicks on him, and he hits a belly-to-belly suplex, and he hits a running shoulder thrust into the corner, and he hits like a belly-to-belly type move, covers Dash. Dash ends up kicking out, and then the Revival get the upper hand on Jason Jordan. They hit a because Jordan goes for a roll-up, but Dash tags himself in, and he hits a clothesline on Jordan, covers him. He ends up kicking out, and then Chad Gable ends up getting tagged back in. They go for Grand Amplitude. The Revival break it up, and there was a sick spot where the Revival got Chad Gable out like he was going to hit the Doomsday device on him, but Gable caught him into a belly-to-belly suplex while he was on Dash's shoulders, which was cool. He covers Dawson, but Dash ends up waking it up. Jason Jordan gets knocked on the outside, and Chad Gable gets Dash into an ankle lock, but Dash ends up fighting out of it. And eventually American Alpha go to hit Grand Amplitude onto Dash, but Dawson throws Gable out of the ring, and he catches Dash, so he can't get to save him. And I think Jason Jordan thought that Dash had hit the move, and then American Alpha hit the Shattered Machine on Jason Jordan for the win, and they become the new NXT Tag Team Champions, and they were the first and only team to become two-time NXT Tag Team Champions, which is extremely impressive. And they celebrate afterwards. And before I get to what happens next, let me talk about where this led both teams. Actually, I'll just talk about what happened next. So afterwards, what happens, you see these two monsters come in, and they just beat the crap out of American Alpha. They annihilate them. They hit splashes on Jason Jordan. They throw him out of the ring. One of them picks up Chad Gable like he's going to sidewalk him, spins him around, and the other one big boots him. And then they hit the Russian leg sweep clothesline combo on Jason Jordan and completely lay him out. And then who you see coming out, none other than Paul Ellering, who is one of the greatest managers in the history of professional wrestling. And they stand it with Paul Ellering and pretty much showing that he's with these guys, which was a cool moment for them. So now that I've covered this, let me talk about where these all these tag teams went from this. The Revival and American Alpha would have one final NXT Tag Team Championship match on an episode of NXT, and a 2 out of 3 falls match where the Revival were able to pull up the victory and retain their NXT Tag Team Championships. The week before that, we would find out that these guys' names were the Authors of Pain, and they ended up attacking American Alpha again, and it led to a match between the Authors of Pain and American Alpha, and the Authors of Pain ended up destroying American Alpha, and that would be American Alpha's last match in NXT, because in July they were called up to the main roster due to the brand split, and they were drafted to SmackDown. They would go on to have a decent run on SmackDown. Not the greatest one. They didn't really get over with the mainstream audience, mainly because they didn't do what they did to get them over in NXT by having them cut promos and stuff, which was a fail. And American Alpha but they would go on to win the SmackDown Tag Team Championships in December, and they would hold on to them until March. They did pretty much then have been in an inconsequential role as of late, which sucks, because I think they're a really good team. You know, you have the Revival, who went on to have some great matches down in NXT. They would go on to lose the NXT Tag Team Championships at NXT TakeOver Toronto, and then eventually they would have a couple of more matches at NXT specials, and then the night after WrestleMania 33, they were called up to the main roster. But now Dash has it out due to an injured jaw, so the Revival can't really do anything, which sucks for them. But the Revival and American Alpha both benefited greatly from this match. American Alpha, even though they're not in a consequential role, but this match, but they were able to get called up to the SmackDown, and the Revival became the top tag team down in NXT. As for the Authors of Pain, they benefited hugely from this attack. They went on to dominate every tag team in sight. They went on to win the Dusty Rhodes Tag Team Classics at NXT TakeOver Toronto. They went on to then win the NXT Tag Team Championships at NXT TakeOver San Antonio, and they've pretty much have dominated every tag team in sight. And now they're just have been a dominant tag team. So overall, all teams benefited from this match. So overall, this match did what it was supposed to do. Okay, so next match was Austin Aries versus Shinsuke Nakamura. And one weird thing about this match was Austin Aries came out and his ribs were all taped up. But they didn't say why his ribs were taped up. Well, we didn't know why his ribs were taped up. We didn't really know why he was injured. But Corey Graves did say something on commentary that maybe Austin Aries was trying to play mind games with Shinsuke Nakamura by making him go after his ribs, so that way he won't go after another injury, or he won't kick him in the head. But it was just kind of really weird. But yeah, the match still ended up being good, and I think that's what they were trying to do, because Aries didn't like sell like his ribs were hurt or anything. So, we get the match itself though, and the match was a really good match. Probably not as good as the NXT TakeOver Dallas match that Nakamura had in his debut, but still a really good match. They both start chain wrestling each other, and Nakamura spins his head down across Austin Aries, trying to play mind games with him, which pisses Aries off. So he goes to charge at him. Aries kicks him in the Nakamura kicks him in the ribs, and he goes to kick him in the head, but Aries avoids it. Aries goes to drop kick him, but Nakamura avoids it. Then eventually Aries takes down Nakamura, hits a drop kick on him, covers him. Nakamura kicks out, and Aries starts to work over the knee of Nakamura. He hits the drop kick in the corner right to Nakamura's knee while it's hung up on the top rope, and he hits a couple of dragon screw leg drops, gets him into like a submission. He got him in one submission where he stretched Nakamura's back as he pressed his leg right into Nakamura's bad knee, which I thought was really cool. Aries goes off the top rope and hits a elbow right to the back of the neck of Nakamura. He hits a drop kick off the top rope, and Aries also hits a suplex on him. Nakamura still is able to kick out of all this stuff, and then Aries hits an elbow drop. Nakamura still kicks out, and then Nakamura starts to make his comeback. He hits 3 kicks to the chest of Austin Aries, and he hits the kick right to the ribs while Austin Aries is on like the turnbuckle. Austin Aries though finds a way to fight back. He clotheslines Nakamura out of the ring. He hits a suicide dive on the outside. He goes for the 450, but Nakamura counters and he goes for the cross arm breaker. Aries holds his arm so Nakamura can't fully get it in, but then he turns it into the triangle choke, and Aries is able to fight out of it. Aries hits a rolling forearm on Nakamura, and he gets him in the last chancery. Nakamura is able to get to the ropes, and Nakamura hits a enziguri on Aries. He hits 3 knees right to his head, and he goes to hit the knee to the ribs again, but Aries this time moves out of the way, and he goes to dive on Nakamura. Nakamura counters it, and he hits an enziguri while he's on the apron, and then he goes to hit Akeem Sasha while he's on the apron, but Aries counters with a Death Valley driver right on like the hardest part of the apron. It actually looked pretty damn devastating. And Aries tries to have Nakamura counted out, but I think he sees him getting to his feet, so Aries takes the chance to try to hit a suicide dive on him, and he does, but then Nakamura moves out of the way, and Aries goes crashing right into the guardrail. It actually looked pretty brutal. I thought he maybe could have hurt himself or something, and then Nakamura puts him in the ring, hits like the knee to the back of the head off the second turnbuckle, an exploder suplex, and the Akeem Sasha for the win. White person went over because Nakamura was someone that was more over than Aries was, and he was someone that he was more of a unique figure to push as the face of NXT. But Aries still looked really strong in this match. He actually dominated Nakamura throughout most of it. So I thought they made both guys look strong, and it just looked like Nakamura was just the better man on that occasion. And then the aftermath of this match came. Austin Aries would go on to turn heel shortly afterwards because he was frustrated that he lost. ironically enough, they would have actually another match again where Nakamura ended up injuring Aries' cornea, which is pretty interesting. And this would lead us, that would be Austin Aries' final match in NXT, and then he was called up to the main roster, and since he was injured, at first he just did commentary on 205 Live with Corey Graves, actually, and then eventually, once he healed up, he ended up joining the Cruiserweight division as a competitor, competed for the Cruiserweight Championship at WrestleMania 33, didn't win it, fought for it at Payback, won by disqualification, and now he has an opportunity to win the Cruiserweight Championship at Extreme Rules of 2017. So that's interesting there. And, you know, pretty much Austin Aries is the big baby face of the Cruiserweight division. He's probably the second best guy they have in the Cruiserweight division, so that's cool for him. It's just, like I said, it's a real shame that he's in a division nobody really cares about, though. Let's be honest, the Cruiserweight division is something that the WWE doesn't care about, so it's kind of a shame that Aries, I don't think, will ever get like a big fair break, because I think he's going to be stuck in the Cruiserweight division where he could easily be elevated, you know, either right to the at least the mid-card division where he could fight for the Intercontinental Championship, or he could fight, you know, in the main event, either go on SmackDown and wrestle for the WWE Championship, and he could really have some stealer matches there, or he could wrestle for the WWE Universal Championship. But, you know, it's a shame that he won't ever really, I don't think they'll ever really push him to that level. Plus, I think he's kind of, well, he's you know, kind of in his late 30s, so maybe they don't want to build the company around him. But as for Shinsuke Nakamura would eventually, you know, he was going on his whole thing where he wanted to beat the best in NXT, and then the next person he would wrestle Finn Balor, and he would defeat him, which pretty much kind of cemented his place as the face of NXT. He would go on to win the NXT Championship at NXT TakeOver Brooklyn 2, but then he would lose it at NXT TakeOver Toronto, and then he would regain it back in his home country of Japan and become the second ever two-time NXT champion. He would lose at NXT TakeOver San Antonio. Then he would lose his rematch in NXT TakeOver Orlando. But pretty much Shinsuke Nakamura pretty much was the face of NXT. You know, he wasn't there just yet, but he became the face of NXT, which was really cool for Shinsuke Nakamura. And after NXT TakeOver Orlando, he ended up getting called up to the main roster on the SmackDown brand. And the Backlash is already over now, and he just had his first match on the main roster that I have not seen yet, but I will see it once I finish doing the series. But overall, I would say both Austin Aries and Shinsuke Nakamura benefited from this match. Shinsuke Nakamura benefited a little bit more, but that's because he actually won this match, so it actually made sense why he would benefit more. But Austin Aries, I think, still benefited a decent amount. I think had he not gotten injured, we would have gotten a few more great matches with Austin Aries, so in NXT, so it is kind of a shame that happened, but overall, I think both competitors benefited from this matchup, though. Okay, next match was an NXT Women's Championship match. NXT Women's Champion Asuka versus Nia Jax. And this was a solid match here, not the best women's match. This might actually be, it's not the worst women's match at an NXT special. That's coming very soon, though, I think, though. But let me talk about this match. So, I thought this match, this actually wasn't the worst. The worst one may have been at NXT TakeOver London, Asuka versus Bayley. That might be the worst one, but I'm not sure exactly. But anyhow, let me talk about this match, and then I'll let you know. So, this match worked so much better because you had Asuka be kind of dominant, but she wasn't as dominant as she was in NXT TakeOver London. And I thought Asuka and Nia Jax actually had some pretty good chemistry in the ring together. I think Asuka got a good match out of Nia, but I think Nia definitely got something out of Asuka too. I think it does take two to tango, and I think Nia definitely did her part in this match. At first, they start kind of Nia, at first Asuka tries to go after the legs of Nia, but she's just not having that. She tosses Asuka halfway across the ring, and this surprises Asuka. So then she has to kind of rethink her strategy. But then Nia Jax destroys Asuka. She picks her up and just slams her against the corner, hits a couple of splashes in the corner, and she destroys Asuka throughout the beginning of the matchup. But Asuka tries to get her into she gets her into an octopus stretch. Nia Jax turns it into a tilt-a-whirl backbreaker, she covers her. Asuka kicks out, and she destroys Asuka in the beginning, but Asuka tries to make somewhat of a comeback. She hits some kicks to the head, but Nia still is able to cut her off. She hits a wicked suplex on Asuka. She hits an elbow drop on her. Asuka tries to get her into a cross arm breaker, but Nia Jax is just too strong, so she ends up laying him out with a huge power bomb. She hits a hip attack in the corner onto Asuka, and then eventually Asuka tries to make some sort of comeback. She gets her into the what happens? Asuka gets her into a sleeper hold. Asuka's able to fight out. Nia is able to fight out of it. Asuka hits a drop kick. It doesn't knock Nia Jax down though. She hits a drop kick from the middle turnbuckle, and then she hits a hip attack on Nia Jax while she's on her knees. Covers her. Nia kicks out. Then Nia Jax just immediately hits a powerbomb on Asuka, covers her. Nia turns it into a cross arm breaker, to which then she tries to turn into the Asuka lock, but Nia powers out of it. And then Asuka hits a kick right to Nia's head, and then another kick to her head, and Nia starts to scream like she's a monster. Asuka kicks her in the head again, then she bounces off the ropes and hits a Shining Wizard, and covers her and gets the victory and retains the NXT Women's Championship. But I actually thought this was a solid match, and it accomplished what it was supposed to do. It added to Asuka's resume, showing that she was impossible to beat, so I thought the match worked. And the aftermath came. Bayley would return shortly afterwards to NXT. She would defeat Nia Jax to get revenge for injuring her, and then shortly afterwards Nia Jax would get called up to the main roster after the brand split, and she would be drafted to Raw, where she was pretty decently dominant there. She competed for the Raw Women's Championship in a Fatal 4-Way at WrestleMania 33, and meanwhile Asuka continued to stay down in NXT. She fought Bayley in the rematch for the NXT Women's Championship at NXT TakeOver Brooklyn 2, where she was able to pull out the victory. And then she pretty much has just been dominant in NXT. No one's been able to beat Asuka. I believe she has the longest undefeated streak ever in the history of professional wrestling, and she's the longest reigning NXT Women's Champion in history, and I believe she's the longest reigning NXT champion of any kind in NXT history, which is really damn impressive. So overall, this match benefited both women involved, which is a good thing. Okay, so next it shows an interview from William Regal from earlier today, and he's pretty much talking about what to expect from NXT TakeOver the end, and you know how he's looking forward to it and everything. Then we see somebody walk backstage with Bobby Roode, and William Regal gets whispered by that same guy, and he goes into his office and pretty much has a meeting with Bobby Roode, which was awesome. Which pretty much, you know, was more of a sign that Bobby Roode had signed with NXT. I believe it had already been known before, but they didn't really say it on actual NXT television. But it was, you know, a really awesome moment. Eventually Bobby Roode would make his debut in NXT, and he would have his first match at NXT TakeOver Brooklyn 2, where he would defeat Andrade Cien Almas, and then he ended up defeating Ty Dillinger in NXT TakeOver Toronto. Then he ended up defeated. He was the top heel in NXT. They were really pushing him hard. They ended up winning the NXT Championship from Shinsuke Nakamura at NXT TakeOver San Antonio, and retained it at NXT TakeOver Orlando. And he's the top heel in NXT. He's got the NXT Championship. And Bobby Roode was a huge deal to have because he was someone that had just left TNA Impact Wrestling, and he was the hugest probably free agent that they had, and the fact that he had signed with NXT was huge, so I thought this was awesome. Okay, so then we had the main event. It was a steel cage match for the NXT Championship. NXT Champion Samoa Joe versus Finn Balor, and this was a really good cage match, and a great way to blow off this feud. So Finn Balor has a special entrance. He's dressed as obviously the Demon, but this time he's kind of dressed like Venom, which I thought was awesome. And he has like this cage like doors, walls behind him, and he just knocks them down, and it just really made him look like a demon. I thought that was sick. But we get the match itself, and Joe immediately tries to escape the cage, but Balor lays away at him with right hands. He hits a drop kick on Joe, and he pretty much kicks Joe's ass for a while, but then Joe tosses him spine first 3 times into the steel cage, and he pretty much dominates Finn Balor throughout the rest of the matchup. He hits a splash and an enziguri in the corner, and he goes to escape the cage. Balor holds his leg so he can't escape, and Finn Balor then starts to make his comeback. He hits a drop kick on Joe. He hits a chop into while he's trapped against the cage, and he hits like a ton of chops there. He goes for and then he hits a drop kick into the cage. He tries to use Joe to escape, but Joe stops him, and then Balor hits a soccer ball kick, and Joe's dead weight falls on the turnbuckle, and Balor gets hung up balls first on the turnbuckle, and then he tries to escape later on, but Joe hits an enziguri to his back, which causes them both to fall down. And then Samoa Joe hits a Uranagi on Balor. He goes for the Muscle Buster. Balor counters it into the Sling Blade, and then he hits a drop kick, and a lot more Sling Blades, but Joe hits a senton on him, and then he hits a Muscle Buster, covers him. Balor kicks out. Balor hits a drop kick a ton of times and a Sling Blade. Actually, Balor even ended up hitting a Sling Blade off the top of the cage, and Balor hit a coup de grace and covers him. Joe kicks out, and then he goes for 1916. Joe gets him into the Corkia clutch, and Balor's able to run off the turnbuckle and hit a double stomp on him, and he tries to escape the cage, but Joe stops him. He bounces his head off the cage, and he hits a Muscle Buster off the top rope for the win. There was a lot more stuff that happened in this match, but those were like the main highlights of the match. And afterwards, you just see Joe standing over Balor's prone body as medical attention checks on him, and I thought that was the perfect way to end this feud. And obviously, this was the first time Finn Balor had lost since he's been in the Demon Coronation, which they didn't really address all that much, which I was kind of surprised about. But I thought this match was a perfect way to end off this feud. And then the aftermath came. Finn Balor would have one final match in NXT against Shinsuke Nakamura and really help put him over as like the face of NXT. It was kind of like a passing of a torch. If Finn Balor was the face of NXT, now he was passing it to Shinsuke Nakamura, and then he would get caught up to the main roster shortly afterwards. He would get caught up to Raw because of the brand split, and he would become the first ever WWE Universal Champion at SummerSlam, but he ended up getting injured in that match, so he ended up having to vacate the title the next night, and he ended up getting injured, so he had to go have shoulder surgery, and he would return. He originally returned at a live event in Madison Square Garden in a 6-man tag team match, where ironically enough, Samoa Joe was on the opposing team. Kind of funny how that works out. And then he had his televised return the night after WrestleMania 33 in another tag team match that Samoa Joe was also on the opposing team of, so that's kind of ironic how that stuff works itself out. So that's kind of where Finn Balor's gone. Samoa Joe would go on to continue to hold the NXT Championship. He would lose it to Shinsuke Nakamura at NXT TakeOver Brooklyn 2. But then he would regain the championship at NXT TakeOver Toronto and become the first ever two-time NXT champion. Not the only one, because then he would lose it 2 weeks later to Shinsuke Nakamura, where he would become, and he would have the shortest NXT championship reign in NXT history. And then he had his final match in NXT in a steel cage match against Shinsuke Nakamura for the NXT championship, which Shinsuke Nakamura was able to pull out the victory. And then eventually the night after the Royal Rumble, Samoa Joe was called up to the main roster, where he's pretty much one roughshod on the main roster. He's probably like I'd say maybe like the number 2 heel on Raw at the moment. And ironically enough, him and Finn Balor competed in a fatal 5-way match where the winner is going to face is going to become the number 1 contender for the WWE Universal Championship, and it's just kind of ironic how that stuff works itself out. So overall, both wrestlers benefited from this match. Samoa Joe has gone on to become a big star in NXT, and he's pretty much one roughshod on the main roster so far. Finn Balor became a pretty big star on the main roster. I think he would probably be a bigger star had he not gotten injured and have to vacate the title, the Universal Championship. So overall, though, both people benefited from this match, so it worked itself out. Okay, so the end of the show was a Facebook Live interview with Triple H. He was interviewed by Kathy Kelly, and he starts off by admitting the reason how he came up with the name NXT TakeOver the End. And at first he jokes by saying that NXT is no longer, it's over, it's done. But then eventually he says, yeah, that probably would have blown up in the internet. So I did like that he tried to troll people. But he says that because a lot of rivalries were coming to an end, like the main one being Finn Balor and Samoa Joe, how they had been fighting for months for the NXT Championship, and they were having a big blow-up match in the steel cage, so he thought that would have been a fitting name for it. But he says another reason why this was called NXT TakeOver the End was because NXT was always known as a developmental brand, and it was just to get people to the main roster. But then when NXT took off in 2014 and was released on the WWE Network, then everybody started watching NXT. NXT started to grow into this huge brand. And he says that another reason why it's called the end is because it's the end of NXT being a developmental system and the beginning of it being a brand. So I thought that actually made sense. And then pretty much he just kind of runs down the card about what was on the show, but he kind of does it like in a kayfabe type of sense where he's trying to maintain it. So I thought that was nice, and overall it was actually a nice listen to. So overall I enjoyed the Facebook Live exclusive video. Alright, so now I'm going to give you my overall thoughts and star ratings for each match. So I'm going to start with the star ratings. For the Andrade Cien Almas Ty Dillinger match, I'm probably going to give that match probably 2 stars. It was a nice quick opening matchup. For the NXT Tag Team Championship match, I'm probably going to give that 3.5 stars because I thought that was a really good match. For the Shinsuke Nakamura Austin Aries match, I'm probably going to give that match kind of tough to say. Probably give that match maybe 3.25 stars. And for the NXT Women's Championship match, I'm probably going to give that 2.5 stars. It was a nice solid match. And then for the NXT Championship match, I'm probably going to give that probably 4 stars because it was actually my favorite match just because of what it led to. So now that I've covered that, let me just repeat them. So for the Andrade Cien Almas Ty Dillinger match, going to give that 2 stars. NXT Tag Team Championship match, going to give that probably 3.5 stars. For the Nakamura Austin Aries match, going to give that 3.25. For the NXT Women's Championship match, probably going to give that match probably 2.5. And for the NXT Championship match, going to give that match 4 stars. So that's my star ratings for the show. And overall, I actually thought the show was Actually, a good show. It flowed really well. The right people went over in the right ways, and it was good to see NXT kind of go back to home for a special, and it was nice and different. So overall, if I had to say, I'd probably give the show maybe an 8.5 out of 10 because it was actually a good show. Not as good as like NXT Takeover Dallas or NXT Takeover London, but a good show. But that's pretty much it, guys. Please make sure to like, comment, subscribe, and make sure to check out the other videos on this channel. And make sure to check out my own The Talking to You and CM Brother channel. That's pretty much it, guys. And I wanted to have got these done by the time I went over to before I went to Texas, but it doesn't look like that's going to happen. So I will probably try to do some of these while I'm in Texas, if I have the time, and if not, I'll do them when I come back. I will let you know what's going to go